with Anne.
What's up? I'm Ayla.
This is Let's Talk BL, a boys love podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Yes.
Today, we are discussing a topic that we joked about doing as an episode, and then a bunch of people in the comments were like, no, but you should do that episode. And so now we're doing that episode.
I feel like that's how so much of this podcast
Like,
goes.
it was a joke. Like, we were joking about it. We were like, ha, 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 that would be a funny episode. And then, like, a bunch of comments were like, no, but, like, you should do that. So, yeah, we're doing it.
You're welcome. Mainly because it's such a funny conversation to have as fans who came from K-pop world. Kind of the context of how we talk about BL a lot of comes from K-pop because that's our context, and just like being fans in general, I feel like I didn't hear "who's your bias" until K-pop, right? Like that's a K-pop term as far as I know. And so then
I feel like people don't typically even use bias in BL either, though. Like,
right, no.
It's very much like a term that only stands because it's not just a K-pop term. Like, I have heard it in other contexts, but it's definitely a term that stands have brought over because typically, like, historically, and there's like a fight happening right now too. Even like I saw it on TikTok and I was like, oh, swipe away from that about like the idea of supporting one person in a couple and not the other one, and like just the idea of that, and like and so it's kind of controversial to have like a singular bias. Like that's why people are like, who's your ship?
Right. Because you talked about this recently and I had never thought about it. Well, the idea that like you have a captain of your ship.
Yes, I actually full on stole that from TikTok. And anybody who's on TikTok knows like who that comes from. And I will put their @ in the description of this episode because they're awesome. But so yes, that actually comes from someone else on TikTok who was always talking about like, well, the captain of my ship, and I'm like, well, that's genius. Like I have always had like a captain of my ship because I enjoy ships, I enjoy the ship work, but I'm not like, I very rarely float into Delulu land.
Right.
Like, it has happened to me a couple of times, but it's very rare. And so more so, I'm like, I enjoy this ship work, but I really like this one boy.
Yeah, I tend to like the ship work a lot more. But yeah, I do tend to lean towards one boy or the other as far as following what they do work-wise. Like, I really got into Taenu, but then I leaned more towards New and will follow his work more so, like acting, because of just the nature, I think, of what he acts in. I do watch Tay stuff, but like I'm more inclined to New.
Yeah. So, and then like obviously everyone has like that one boy or like those top 3 boys that they're like, I would die for you. Like I would throw someone like, off a cliff for you.
Top 10 boys.
I don't think I have as many as 10 that I'm like that I would die for. Like I, for most ships, do have like one that I favor over the other. Not that it means I dislike the other one. I just have one that I like gravitate towards.
Well, nowadays we're getting a lot of singular ships, which is really kind of nice because they'll like switch it up, right? Like Sia, one of our favorites. He's now on his second.
Oh yeah, Sia is one of mine where like I would like die for Sia. Like I would throw someone off a cliff for Sia to get to Sia. I would do anything for Sia. He is the cutest boy in Thailand. And I love that.
It's accurate. I feel like he was really the first actor that I was like,
no, that's not true. It was Copter.
I mean, yes, Copter.
That's not true. That is such a flat out lie.
Copter was definitely the captain of that ship.
You were about to be like, he was the first actor that I like really went. No. It was Copter. I remember because it was before I was even into BL, and you were so down and out for Copter that like I knew who Copter was and I knew about Copter. I knew everything Copter had done because you were so down and out for Copter.
And truly meeting Copter IRL was like the most surreal moment of all time because they were even nicer in person. And I was like, and that people say over and over again, like, how do you guys interact with these people? How do you talk to these people? And we're like, they're just humans.
Except
like,
that with Copter, we didn't. Like,
no,
if the question
fully
is,
broke us.
if the question is, how did you interact with Copter? The answer is, I didn't. Literally, we've told this story a million times, but we saw Copter before the Element interview, which really was a disservice to us because
yes,
I had already had a mental breakdown that day, and then I was further broken.
Yeah.
And
because they just like casually walk by us to go to the bathroom.
And nobody saw it but me and Renee. Nobody saw, y'all didn't even see it. Me and Renee saw it, and we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, that was Copter?
And you both go, that was Copter, and they were gone by that point.
They were gone. And nobody believed us. Everybody was like, you guys are crazy. Yeah, like, everybody was like, you guys are crazy. And me and Renee were like, no, like we saw Copter, like that was Copter. And then they came back and then we saw Copter again and it was fine. But then after the Element interview, after we've done our best, like hold our lives together by a thread, my friends, by a thread. Copter stands in the doorway and is waiting to speak to us, and we didn't comprehend that that's what was happening at the time. In our lizard brains, we were like, Copter, like literally, like our brains just started screaming. And so we rushed to the doorway because we're thinking, now's our opportunity. Now's our chance.
We have no shame at this point because we've already done the interview.
We did what we were supposed to do.
We had both gotten solo photos with boys that we wanted to. And so we were like, who cares? Like, we're fully going to take advantage.
We're out by.
We're like, Star Hunter can kick us out now. We've done the thing. So, like, we're going to shoot our shot. And truly, I went up to Copter and I was like, can we take a photo with you? And they were like, yes, of course. And we just like blanked them on both sides. And they were like, do you want to go into the light?
Yeah, we like rush into the hallway. Yeah, we like rush into the hallway and we're like, and we're both just kind of like heavy breathing, like in the worst, most embarrassing kind of way. And we're both, by the time they say yes, both of us are like just profusely thanking them. It's like true. We got really high pitched. And it's funny because I've looked back at these photos a couple times because I've also done some real soul searching to figure out what happened with God and myself. And so I've looked back at these photos and you can see the Element boys in the mirror in the background. And there's one where Tora's fully side-eyeing us. Like, and it's so funny because like we didn't care. All those Element boys were in there and we were like, I don't know who you are. I've never seen your face before.
It was one of those situations where like everything around me disappeared and I had no clue how I looked to anyone else in the room.
You had like tunnel vision.
Totally. And then it was even better because I got to talk to Copter after that and I screamed, He Drinks You Drunk is probably one of my favorite songs of all time. And they were like, they were like, I really worked hard on that song. And I'm like, I love that. I appreciate it.
It was very cute. Much. So this discussion is how you choose your BL bias / how your BL bias chooses you, depending on the scenario.
That's true.
So since we started with Copter, explain why. I don't think you've ever told me like why it was, besides like you did just like screech the word dimple at me a bunch of times.
I do love dimples. Nanun got me. Copter got me. I feel like there's another dimpled boy lately.
Well, there are many dimpled boys
it's true.
In the world of BL.
I see a dimple and it gets me. I think She Drinks You Drunk.
Is it She Drinks You Drunk or He Drinks You Drunk?
She Drinks You Drunk. He Drinks You Drunk.
You say it so many ways, and I just like I trust you implicitly when it comes to Copter.
I'm pretty sure it's She Drinks You Drunk.
Hold on, we're gonna look it up.
That would make sense. She Drinks You Drunk.
No, it's He Drinks. Yeah, You Drunk. Whoa.
He Drinks You Drunk. Okay, He Drinks You Drunk. Right, because Copter's talking to the ex-boyfriend.
Right.
Like talking about the ex-boyfriend. There is so much, because I got into Kim Cop through...
Was it Gen Y?
I'm pretty sure Gen Y. Yes, Gen Y season 1, because Gen Y season 1 was coming out when I got into BL.
Because I showed you 2 Moons.
And then I went back to 2 Moons.
Yeah.
No,
No, I showed you 2 Moons too. You had never watched 2 Moons too.
I had already watched 2 Moons. And so I think there was the dimples. I watched a lot of Kim Cop footage, and Copter was just like, I was fascinated by Copter. There was a ton of like Copter content on the internet that just like drew me in. And Copter is just so nice. Like they're so just the type of person that you can just they're entertaining, I think is what it is too. And I was just
They
in
are very
awe.
charismatic. I think I
Yeah.
have only ever see because when it comes to Kim Cop, neither of them I would say I would put on my like BL bias list.
Mhm.
But in the ship where we were talking about you gravitate towards one, I gravitate more towards Kimmin.
Yeah.
And I kind of always have. And it's 100% Kimmin's personality. Like
Yeah.
we understand this about me. It's very
Yes.
clear. But all of the footage that I've seen of Copter was always in relation to mostly Two Moons because I really enjoyed Two Moons. And so I watched a lot of like Kim Cop stuff in relation to Two Moons, and the way that
Mhm.
like all ships, by the way, all ships do ship work
Mhm.
is it's based on the characters they're playing in their current show.
Right.
So I feel like I never really got the full like Copter experience. And then I did see a bunch of I did during COVID watched a bunch of footage of them like game streaming
Mm.
and just like the conversations but that's really the only context I had for Copter until I got into SB5.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, Copter's very charming. And then I watched Superboy and I was like, oh, I was like, I really
Copter.
understood Copter in like a whole different.
Also, Copter in relation to Baz.
Oh, right. That was another thing very early on that I learned about Copter. Copter and Baz did this thing. So Baz is on my list of BL biases.
Okay.
Where like I would die for you, I would throw
Mhm.
somebody off a cliff for you, like that kind of devotion, love and devotion.
Yes.
That's how I feel about Baz. So I watched a lot of Baz content. And I remember early on when I decided that I liked Baz, I realized that those two like to kiss each other on the mouth to make the girlies go wild. Like,
Just
and it's
all
so
the
funny to
time.
me. It's so entertaining to me that they
It's
figured this out
so
and that they
funny.
like it's like a funsy haha thing. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's so
It's how they greet each other. And it throws people off too, because a lot of times they'll Baz will be showing up to something that Copter's already at, and an MC will be there too, and they'll greet each other, and the MC is like, "But that's not your partner."
but it's not just how they greet each other because there's also one of my favorite clips of Baz and Copter kissing on the mouth is they were at a hotel and there's like glass windows and they're walking into the hotel and there's a bunch of like girls outside, and it's so funny watching girls react to Baz because Baz also has a YouTube channel, and recently he did an episode where he like went to an amusement park kind of
Yeah, yeah.
situation, and at the end of all his vlogs there's like unreleased footage or
Right.
whatever behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
like there's a clip of him like walking up to this table of girls and they all just scream bloody murder. It's so funny to watch people react to Baz. Not that I would be any different.
Yeah, I'm
Listen,
trying
let's
to
be honest.
think like who could break me.
Well, Copter broke us. We realized like that happened.
Yeah.
Copter fully broke us in like a heavy breathing way. But anyways, one of my favorite Baz and Copter kissing on the mouth clips is they're at this hotel. They're going in the hotel, and there's just like a bunch of girls outside, and there are these glass doors. I think it's a hotel. Maybe it was like a mall. I don't know. They were going
Is there
inside
a van
building.
behind them?
Yes.
I know exactly what
They're
you're
getting
talking
out of the van. They're walking. Right. Anybody who has seen this clip knows
Baz
exactly
is
what I'm
blonde
talking
at this
about.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just like talking to the fan, like, and they just are performing for the fans, and they just kiss on the mouth, and the girlies go wild, and Baz gets this look on his face, and that's when I knew. I was like, oh, he's figured out his power.
Yeah.
I was like, and I think that is so wonderful that he's like that he thinks it's so funny that people would react that way just because he's kissing his friend on the mouth. Like, he clearly is like, I don't understand why this is eliciting this reaction, but I like it.
Right.
Like, I love that.
I feel
think
like
it's so
all
funny.
the GMMTV boys have figured that out recently with how and they're just boys, right? Like I find that like younger actors don't care. They're like, we hang all over each other. Like it's what we do. It's what my guy friends did in college. And so yeah.
So you can't name what exactly it was about Copter besides the dimple.
No.
There was just this
a thing.
There was a feeling.
It chose me.
So Copter chose you.
I didn't choose it. Yeah, because I watched He Drinks You Drunk like 1,000 times. Like that was on repeat at all times.
So I guess going into Baz, the way that I decided I liked Baz was 2 Moons, because if anybody decided they liked Baz and Gen Y, I have questions for you, because all he does is cry. I'm like, why is that the thing you're into?
Because we had made that BL music playlist and I had put Lonely Brain on there.
Oh, right. Actually, that's true. I didn't get into him because it was a complicated relationship Baz and I had.
Because we didn't, that song kept popping up and I put it on there. I don't even know why or how, but I put it on there and then like it kept popping up. And every time both you and I would be like, who sings this song? Like,
right. I didn't remember. Know, but I was always like, this is a jam. Like it was good. That year it was on my Spotify Wrapped. Like that, it was like my second most listened to song.
Right.
From the moment I heard that song, was like, this is a masterpiece of a song. And so I loved the song, but then I had also separately watched 2 Moons, and I really loved Baz. I thought that Baz was an excellent actor. I thought that Baz like really committed. I very much was like, oh, this kid is like talented.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this kid is like good. And then I don't remember when it happened, but at some point I put 2 and 2 together and I realized that Baz was Lonely Brain and Lonely Brain was Baz, and just like my whole world imploded. And then I would jump into traffic for Baz.
Yeah, I can't get a good grasp on who Baz is.
See, I can, because I've watched so much Baz footage. I sent you a really long interview that I don't think you ever watched, but I feel like you should watch. There's one specific interview that Baz has given.
Most of that interview
that I feel like really highlights Baz.
Yeah.
I'll put the video in the description of this too. It like Baz is just like a pretty genuine person. Like he comes off very genuine, but he also comes off like pretty humble, which I do appreciate, and I like that about him. I think that's what it is.
Like he seems really like quiet and docile, which is like confusing for a person.
He's like he's quiet, but he's very funny, and he like curses a lot. Also, I do recommend subscribing to his YouTube channel and like following it, because like I'm batting 2 for 2 in that thing. Like, because Gad is also in that, but that's another conversation. But so yeah, like he's funny, but he's super humble, and he's very talented, and he very much like, he's one of those people, like he remembers his roots. Like he knows he was not always famous, and he knows he probably likely will not always be famous. So like he just seems like a good kid. Like I just genuinely think he's like a good kid. I don't know. I don't know him. I've literally never met him. He could be a terrible person, but
but I feel like no one from Star Hunter is a terrible person.
I'm not willing to make that statement, because I just don't know. Like I just don't know. You don't know about anyone. Like
it all seems so nice though. Okay, so that then leads us, before we wrap up with the Star Hunter of it all, explain to the world why God. If you do not know the history behind his name and why we say it in 100 different ways, you should go watch the Element interview, because I have a 5-minute conversation about how to pronounce the letters CAD, KAD.
How dare you?
It's romanized GAD on my drama list as like an alternative, which would have been helpful to pay attention to.
But then we still would have had the problem with the hard A.
But even
because the hard A is the issue.
Even Mimi is like, sometimes he says his name is Card.
No, that's not what she says, because Mimi, I actually got Mimi to like translate this. Okay. That's his hashtag. His hashtag is God, not Card.
Okay.
So like she doesn't say he pronounces his name Card. She's like joking
in relation to the hashtag.
Right. She's like joking.
Because he was like, the I don't know how to say my name.
Yeah.
Because it means market in Northern dialect.
Yes, in the Northern dialect.
God. That KG thing. The Koreans have that.
But it's also the A too. That's confusing, because in the interview you do proceed to call him Kad with like a hard A the whole time. We both do. He explained it fully, and it just never it didn't stick in that moment. I don't know what to say.
Okay, so if you guys don't know at home, we went into that Element interview.
We did.
With our very specific biases.
It's true.
I have always loved Bonus.
It's true.
I have been head over heels for Bonus. It's his cute little face and just like he bonuses. Like
He's got a dimple.
he does have a dimple. That's the other dimple. He like, there's just something so wonderful about Bonus. And I again, you can't explain it half the time. You just
I can. Bonus is not one of my biases, but if he was, I could explain why. Because if he was going to be one of my biases, I love Bonus dearly.
Yes.
I use bonusing as like
Yeah.
a verb in my life.
As you should.
Bonus is a very, very hardworking, dedicated person who gives 110% to everything he does, and I respect him so much. I think
nice.
Bonus is probably the person in the BL world that I have the deepest respect for. Yeah.
I would agree.
I have a really, really like deep respect for Bonus.
Especially after watching Superboy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went in. I was big on Bonus. You were Tora.
I thought
Tora / Tana
I had a very interesting this journey. It's been a long one for me.
And me too.
So yes, I went into it thinking Tora. Like I fully went into it thinking like I was going to be like I fully went into it thinking of Element because I went into it from like a T-pop standpoint. Like this is like K-pop,
Right.
this is like T-pop.
Right.
And from like a T-pop standpoint, I'd watched Tiki Taka Ta, I had watched all of the stages.
Yeah.
From that, based on like the group, I thought it was Tora. I thought Tora was my bias. I genuinely believed this.
We hadn't unceasingly watched Element content and Superboy content. We hadn't watched all the content.
We hadn't watched all the content.
We had just watched Gen Y.
We had watched Gen Y. We had watched The Moment.
We'd watched Gen Y season 1. I don't think you hadn't watched.
I hadn't watched season 2 yet because I was a holdout on season 2, y'all.
You hadn't watched.
I had not watched WhatsApp Man because remember this was like the awakening.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I screamed at you about WhatsApp Man for as long as I can remember.
Right, but it really watching it in the moment that I did was truly the best journey for me.
Meant to
so
be.
I thought from a T-pop standpoint, Tora was my bias.
Yeah.
Tora is very cute. Tora is very talented.
Right.
Tora is everything I like in a boy band boy, logically.
There's nothing logic about a bias.
Logically, Tora is everything that I like from a boy bander.
Right.
If you think about all of my other like K-pop biases,
right,
Tora fits right in. He fits in my collection.
What is God other than the main visual?
He's a vocalist, first of all.
Okay. Thank you. First of all. It's hard to say that without laughing.
Okay, first of all, how dare you? Have you seen him lately? Even you. You're okay. This also happened with Mark Poom. I was like, Mark Poom's so hot. Mark Poom's so cute. And you were like, nah, I'm just not that into it. Whatever. And then all of a sudden, you thought Mark Poom was super hot. And I was like, this is going to happen with God too. You're going to come in, you're going to try to steal God from me. And you're like, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's never going to. Literally, the other day, you sent me a picture of God and you were like, damn.
I know.
So.
But that's not. He's having a moment. I'm not going to I'm not committing to this. It's not going to happen.
Sure. Keep telling yourself that. Anyways, the journey to God. My journey to God. My journey to finding God. The title of this episode, How I Found God.
You have to Romanize it with a G. And X out the A-O part.
Lord have mercy. Okay.
Literally.
So here's what happened. And I figured out what happened. And I remember I texted you like a month ago and I was like, I figured out what happened. And I was like, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to wait for the episode. So here's what happened. I went in thinking Tora was my guy.
Yeah.
All about it. And then the minute I spoke to Big Tana Teep, all of my feelings from the moment came rushing back to me.
Right.
And we specifically talked about the moment with him, and just like everything about Big Tana Teep is so angelic. Like I don't know how else to describe Big Tana Teep besides angelic. Like, honestly, he is a ray of sunshine in a dark, dark world. He is the happiest, like, sweet, like, he makes a room feel better.
And yet he plays these characters who are so murdery.
Right. And listen, still to this day, I would let Big Tanateep murder me.
It's true.
Like, Big
Okay.
Tanateep. And so then,
Big
right, so
Tanateep,
I
not
went
the
in,
bias anymore.
I went
Continue
in
on.
thinking Tora. Then I sat down and I started
You got
talking
Tanateep.
to them, and it was Tanateep, and I like was mesmerized by everything about this man.
And then
and the whole time
God
I'm like,
your hand,
and I remember we left that interview and both of us were like, so God had weird energy, right? Like, we both like said that to each other. We were like, he had weird energy. Like, we both like, we were like, we couldn't figure him out. Yeah, we were like, did he hate us? Did he have fun? Did he like,
because that's what we want in our interviews, like, have fun.
Yeah, like, we really could not figure him out.
It's
like,
because we were in front of a mirror and he couldn't stop looking at himself.
well, he didn't like his hair in the moment. So he was having like trouble. He was very self-conscious about his hair. Anyways. But we couldn't, like, we both left that interview, and here's what I realized is I left that interview, and when I think back, if you remember the whole rest of the time we were in Thailand, anytime Element came up, my comment was always about what was the deal with God.
Yeah.
Like, I never was like, oh, remember how wonderful Big Tanateep was. Remember, like, how we met Copter. Remember how, like, all of these other very, like, incredible things. Literally every photograph that I have with Big Tanateep from that day, it looks like we're dating. Like, I have a photo with him where multiple people have been like, it looks like you're the celebrity and he wanted to take a picture with you. Like, my photos with Big Tanateep are outstanding. For the entire time Element got brought up, I realized, thinking back, the only thing that was stuck in my brain the whole time was God. I was like, I like literally for like weeks was just thinking about God and his behavior and like this, like,
because
this man, like,
if you don't know Ayla, she loves a boy who is aloof.
Yeah.
And weird.
Weird is like peak for me. And so, yes, then I like started thinking back, and the whole time I'm trying to analyze, I'm like, okay, no, maybe he did have fun, because when we were filming that TikTok, which still to this day has never been released,
maybe next time we're in Thailand.
Yeah. We were like trying to time it specifically, and I remember like God fully took charge. He was like, put on a timer. He's like, make it so it makes the noise. He's like, and he's like coordinating everyone. He's like, okay, your hand like this, your hand like that. Like, he's like making everybody's hands the way he wants.
Was like, let's get this over with.
Then he made us do it like 3 times because he wanted it to be perfect. He's very much a professional TikToker here. And so I was like, well, maybe he was engaged because he was so committed to the talk. He was so committed to taking the talk. Yeah, because, you know. And so then we get home. We get home from Thailand, and I still am like, Big Tanateep. I love Big Tanateep, whatever. Like, I would die for Big Tanateep. I would like ballroom dance my way into hell for Big Tanateep. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, we need to do a series Sunday. Let me watch What's Up, Man. Because anytime, we've talked about this before, where anytime we release an interview, we try and kind of like pair the series Sunday with it. And Element was coming out. So like the series Sunday was going to be What's Up, Man. I think I still have the text even. I sat down to watch What's Up, Man. I turn it on, Ep 1. And like immediately God comes on the screen and I text you.
Mm-hmm.
Is God hot? Question mark.
No.
Question mark.
No.
Like, and then it's like, I pulled it up the other day to see because I like couldn't really remember. And then it's like, you didn't reply because I think you were working or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 10 minutes later, I think God is hot. And then like a couple hours pass. And it's like, wait, I think I like God. And then a little bit after that, it's like, I don't know what's happening. And then the egg god just got me. And I realized what happened later on.
I don't even remember God and What's Up, Man, other than he was in the kitchen.
And from that moment, we had problems. Oh, it was a spiral. And I realized when I was seeing it, because we were going to do this episode, and I was like, okay, how do I explain why I like God? It's like, how do I explain this to people? How do I explain that, like, God chose me? This was not a situation of, like, that boy, I like that boy, I want that boy. This was a situation of, like, he came for me.
Right.
It's because all of those things that he did in that interview when we met him, that at the time I didn't, like, internalize was so hard eyes for bank freaking Panatee. Every single thing that he did was so on brand for a boy that I would like, but I just wasn't picking up on them. And then I, like, saw his face and I, like, traveled through time. This is what happened. I swear to God, I genuinely think I, like, saw his face and it triggered, like, repressed memories. And I, like, realized in my heart that, like, when we met them, that, like, that was the boy I was supposed to like the whole time.
I'm really glad that you didn't have your God awakening before we met them, because this would be a full, like, war situation. Like, you've gone war level with God.
God is war level. That's absolutely true.
Are God and war, like, on the same?
No, war will always be number one. War is always number one. I would throw God off a cliff for war. Hundo P. Like, like.
But then you would jump off the cliff to be underneath God for when he fell.
No, because then who would take care of war? Like, ultimately, it's all about war.
Okay.
I would still throw God off a cliff for war, but
gotcha.
I would throw, like, a bunch of people off the cliff before God for war. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have, like, that person, that one person, because mine changes pretty, or, like, I add to mine.
I've got, like, 3 that just, like, but war, yes, is still to this day my, like, ride or die, like, fully. Yeah,
because when we were talking to a Thai fan of BL, and they were like, you kind of have to just pick one and follow them because there's just so many events that go on in Thailand. And I was like, oh God, who would I pick as my one? Like, I don't have a one, because I do have a top 10. Like, when I first got into BL, it was more about, like, the ships. So, like, I was, like, really into Mew Golf, and I was really into Yin War and Z Saint, and, like, a bunch of other ones.
Saint Z
every time. But now I definitely have, like, a top 5 plus that I, like, follow on a regular basis. Because it's more 3. So about, like, following them. Because I would say Louis for sure, although RIP, unclear.
No, but Louis is still around. That's the thing. Like, that's a great thing of having a bias rather than having, like, a ship.
True.
Is that, like, also this is where the world of BL is, like, moving towards, is that, like, the boys can jump around from ship to ship and it's okay. You can still like them.
Mark will definitely be on my list by the end of this year. If not, he's already on the list. That boy. He's got
GMMTV
it.
Mark
with
a K.
Gosh. Yeah, Mark Pekin. Pekin. Todd from Ghost House / Love Area. The only reason I suffered through the second season of Love Area was for Todd.
Okay.
He's magical and perfect and wonderful, and I can't wait to see everything else he does.
Why?
There's just something, the way that he portrayed the characters in the show, especially in Love Area, that character had a lot of mental health issues, and the way that he portrayed that was just so captivating. Because I don't know a ton about Todd as a person in real life. I more so follow people based on acting. Like, when I first got in, like, I followed actors more so than musicians. That's why when I got into K-pop, it was really weird that, like, I suddenly cared about musicians as people, if that makes sense. And so when I was really heavy into, like, indie movies and indie TV shows, I really love John Krasinski, and I literally have watched everything John Krasinski has been in, and he's been in some really bad stuff. Like, just awful stuff that you have to just, like, make it through. And the same with what is his name? There's an actor who was in the Mindy Project. Chris, I think his first name is Chris. It's not coming to me, but I've watched, like, everything he's ever been in. So Todd will be the same for me. New will be the same for me. So I don't really, like, necessarily delve into, like, the personal life of these people, so much as though like I watch like all their work, all the content that comes out. And so that's I think that's what's hard about BL is that they're the popular people that get the content made.
Right.
And so if there's not popularity behind a certain person, then sometimes it's hard. That's why it's kind of nicer when they're part of smaller companies cuz like with God and Baz and like a Star Hunter, right? Like Baz has the freedom and is pursuing kind of other things so he can put more content out there. Uh and yeah, the list is revolving via the
Mm.
there's not I was trying to think like who would my top boy be? Copter was definitely one of my first as far as like individuals. Uh but yeah, I don't have like a war.
Yeah, I kind of always had a war, and I
Yeah.
think it go like, since you mentioned, like, you never really cared about musicians as people, I was always a music girly.
Right.
Like, I was always about the musicians, and it never was that I, like, delved into their personal lives,
Mhm.
it more so was that, like, this art that these musicians were creating, like, art comes from somewhere, and
Right.
so, like, I have always been so curious about the people that, like, are singing that song. And I
Mm.
think that lends itself well to being like a BL fan, is like being curious about the people that are like being
Right.
entertaining to me. But I don't necessarily, and I've never really cared, like, I've never been one of those people into pop culture that like I cared about who was dating who, or
Right.
you know what, like what their type was, like anything like that. I've definitely always been into like the weirdos, which I think is a good thing. Like
Yeah.
I think weirdos are good.
Yeah.
And so like for
Makes
example,
things interesting.
my celebrity crush was always Josh Hutcherson. I've also suffered through so many bad things, but I've seen everything Josh Hutcherson has ever been in. And it, like, mostly that happened because Josh Hutcherson is same age as me and was always in like age appropriate movies for himself. And so like I was
Yeah.
like always at the right age to have a crush on whatever character he was
Oh,
playing,
cute.
which is
Yeah.
like a very interesting thing. It doesn't happen often in Hollywood where they're
Right.
playing like actual age appropriate characters for the age they actually are.
Right.
But Josh Hutcherson kind of always has.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was always in this position from, like, the first time I saw him, he didn't continue to play little kids, like, he quickly, like, moved into teen roles and
Right,
then
right.
into grown-up roles, and so, like, I was always it was like, he was the right age for me, and he was always playing characters that were the right age for me to have a crush on, and
Right.
so, like, I always was very into whatever character Josh Hutcherson was playing. I
Yeah.
never really cared or knew who he was
Right.
dating, and I never really wanted to, because it was more for me that I was, like, so entertained or, like,
Yeah.
enraptured by, like, this person that was creating something out of
His
nothing.
performance.
Like, that's why I always was a writer, that's why I, like, got my master's in publishing.
Right.
I freelance wrote forever before I moved into like more corporate stuff. I still sometimes freelance write, is because like what I love so much about writing is you start with a blank page. You literally create something out of nothing.
Right.
Like there's nothing there, and you take letters and you
Yeah.
put them together and you put them in different orders and you create something. And so like that's what I've always found fascinating about like musicians and actors, but usually it's for me it's usually been
Yeah.
musicians. And I think that lends itself well to being a BL fan, because like I don't actually care who they're dating. I don't actually care
Right.
like what like their private life. I don't actually
Right, right,
care about
right.
their private life. What I care about is like this content they're bringing me. Like it
That and
it continues to fascinate me.
I think that's the cool thing about the ship work too, is that it's an extension and a continuation of the characters on screen. Like that's the unique part about BL is that like if you love these characters that are on screen, they're not necessarily going to stay there because we have the ship work, right? Like we get to see it in real life. It's almost like any appearance that these boys do is like a stage play of an extenuation of those characters that we saw on screen. I think people don't quite conceptualize that a lot of times and they're like, "Oh, it's real. Like these boys are like in like real life." And you're like, "No, they're doing a job. Like they're on a stage. They're literally on a stage all the time." And so, yeah, that's a cool thing about BL and about the ship work aspect. which is definitely a whole nother conversation for
Well,
another
and there's
day.
always endless content. And I think that's what
Yeah.
like makes choosing a bias in BL very interesting, because
Right.
there's this like convergence of you have to like the characters that they've portrayed
Right.
and the shows that they've been in. Right. On some level, you have to like, or the music they've made, or right. Like you
Right.
have to like the art that they've done, the
Right.
thing they've created. But then you also, because of the way that like the BL world is that we're kind of spoon fed this like version of these boys that is
Mhm.
not truly them,
Right.
but it's a version that they're putting out to the world. It's like it is their is who they are to the public, right? And so you're spoon fed this almost like secondary character,
Right.
but it's a constant secondary character versus their other characters change from show to show, from project to project.
Right. Right.
But they're this secondary character stays the same always. It's
Right.
almost like when you at like the book nerd in me is coming out, where it's like when you read a book and like in your mind that character lives on forever. Like that character is having like more other adventures,
Mhm.
they're doing other things, they're living their life, because the book ends but that character doesn't
Right.
end for you as a reader. And that's where like a lot of people as readers, like you have this weird like post book depression that happens because like you don't get to like you feel like talk to this character that you love so
Yeah.
much anymore, right? And so
Right.
like BL is very similar, I think,
Mhm.
in that we're given this sort of secondary character, and that secondary character stays constant.
Right.
And so that's where like when it comes to choosing a bias, like I think that people gravitate towards the thing that they like, right? Like the series, the music, the whatever, the character that they like.
Mhm.
But then what turns that person into their bias is that is liking some aspect of that secondary character that stays
Yeah.
constant, like that stays constant. And I think that's how you really end up choosing your bias, whether or maybe they choose you, whatever. And like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't realize like what happened to me with God, where it's like I didn't realize that that character that God is, because I don't pretend to know him. I don't know
Right.
him.
Right.
But that God character that is, right, like God element, right, like that is this person
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that he puts out there, had all of these other little aspects that like I have just always found interesting in a person.
Right.
And so what happened when like God chose me is that like I didn't realize that he had all those qualities until I realized it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
until it
Yeah.
like again I had like like you know PTSD flashback. Um but sometimes you point it out and you realize it and you're like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I never stood a chance."
Yeah.
Right? Where you're like, "Oh, this boy checks every box. This secondary
Right.
character checks every box for me."
Yeah. And a lot of times you'll be following a ship and then suddenly you'll get hit by one of them and you're like, "Oh my gosh." Like I have loved, well, I guess Kauna Turbo has been an experience in and of itself, but Kauna has always been kind of the forefront of that because of just like he's played single characters
Right.
through the whole thing, and then you learn about Kauna Turbo, and then finally Love Stage came out. But like Kauna is someone who you watch all of the work that he's done, and you also just watch him as a person on a stage or on content, and like he's just so captivating. Like he just seems he's like it talking to him or like interacting with him when we went to go see him perform, I like you just can't take your eyes off of
No,
him.
I will say. So, Count Turbo. Remember how I said I very rarely, you know,
Go
veer
Delu.
into
Yeah,
Delulu
yeah,
land.
yeah, yeah.
Count Turbo is one of my few Delulu land situations. But meeting Kauna, I think, because I hadn't really watched a ton of like Kauna stuff. I'd watched a lot of
Right.
Kauna Turbo stuff,
Right.
but I hadn't really watched a lot of Kauna stuff. And so meeting Kauna, there is something electric about this human being. Like I don't know how else to explain it besides the fact that like Kauna's presence, like he doesn't even have to say anything or
Right.
do anything. Just Kauna's presence, it, like there's like a
Is a lot.
buzz in the air.
Yeah.
Like it's the wildest thing. It's
Yeah.
truly the wildest thing.
It's really rare. I would say Jung has it, but Jung is so beautiful
I don't know.
that you
Jung
like
is
don't want to believe it. Like
I like maybe I just because I'm like old school June, 2
I
moons,
think
2
so,
June,
yeah.
I kind of see him a little bit differently. And also like I always have just been so endeared to June that
True,
I kind
true.
of see him as like this cute kid that I think is cute and like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
good for you, June. Versus like
Oh,
Cow and I'm like, oh my God, you're like a star. Like there's
yeah.
just something about him that's like a star versus like June when we met him like in real life in person in
Mhm.
Bangkok. I like it felt very friendly. Like it felt very naturally
Mm.
friendly to me. Like I was seeing an old friend again kind of
Yeah.
thing versus like when Kauna walked in that room for the first time and every other time I was in the same room as him, like it never stopped. That was the crazy thing
Yeah.
about Kauna is that sort of like magnetism of like, oh my God,
We're breathing the same
never wore
air.
off. It
It's
never
true.
wore off. Like with Copter, it wore off. By the time we were leaving, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, cool, we're chill. Like we've had a conversation. Like this
Right.
is fine now. With Kauna, it never wore off. Like it wasn't, it was
I think
wild.
we should end this conversation with Sia because I would say the same applies to Sia.
I had a full mental breakdown over Sia in real life.
Like every time we interact with him in our interviews and anything, we adore him.
I have no ability to be
He
chill with Sia. I
no,
really
he
don't.
is the cutest boy in Thailand.
Yes.
He's someone that like I will always be a fan of and I will always support whatever he
Oh,
does
yeah.
to like the extreme. We talk about this too, like the idea of this fan culture that has been created around a lot of these artists that you like will send them bouquets of money or you'll send them clothes. I'm like, I don't know if I will ever get to fan status where I'll send a boy clothes because
Yeah.
that happens in K-pop too. And it's something that I'm like, it's an interesting concept. I'm like, cool. If you want to do that, that's awesome. But like that level of like devotion, that's something like I give to like close friends and family or like the children I take care of. But maybe that's it. Maybe if you feel like this is your child and you want
Or
to
like
take
that
care of
closeness,
them,
like because you were like, oh, this is something I give to friends, and like me too.
right?
Or like I shop, like I have always shopped for like my boyfriends, like always.
Yeah,
And so like maybe if you feel that sort of closeness, whatever, whether it's like platonic, whether it's like maternal, whether
right,
it's romantic, right? Whatever closeness you're
right.
feeling.
But I'm like, will there ever be a boy that I have such devotion to?
You're just buying them clothes.
I want to buy him clothes because we've sent money bouquets.
Yeah, because it's amazing. I also received a money bouquet once, and I've
Yeah,
never felt so special in my whole life. I money bouquets are like the most fun
they're
thing
pretty
that I've
cool.
ever discovered in Thailand.
I'd send food trucks because those are pretty
That's
cool.
pretty cool, yeah.
Because a lot of it's the return on investment of like how cool it looks for me to have sent this to this person.
It's also very fun, and this also circles back around to Sia, is the greatest thing about us loving Sia as much as we do. And it all started with you told me, you were like, I really think you're gonna like this boy in You're My
Yes.
Sky. Like you told me that and you were like, watch it, I think you're gonna like him.
Yes.
And immediately I did. Like I was one of those people, I was one of those weirdos. I was definitely an outlier. I loved You're My Sky from episode 1.
Yeah.
Like most people are like, "Oh, I had to get into it a little bit."
Right.
Not me. I was completely captivated by Sia's performance. Like I felt for him. I felt so deeply for him. I'm like sitting there sobbing
Yeah.
in episode 2. Like he made me feel so many feelings through
Yeah.
his acting. And yes, it captivated me immediately. And then I like got to know Sia, the character, right? Like
Yeah.
Sia, like our Sia. And he
is
was
ours.
just
He's our
so
Let's Talk Real mascot.
cute and perfect and wonderful and sweet. And then like we talked to him, and but so Sia is a great example of the perfect bias. Like I genuinely think Sia is the perfect bias. He's on. Remember, I said I have a list,
Yes.
like a short list. Sia is the perfect bias because he loves how much anyone loves him.
Yeah.
If you love him, if you put time and love and effort and
Yes.
support into him, he gives that back to you, the royal you, like everyone,
Mhm.
100-fold.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him the perfect bias, in my opinion, is that like it really is this it's the perfect fan artist relationship because it doesn't cross the line. There is like, he's not my friend.
No.
He's not my friend. I don't want him to be my friend.
No.
I want to be his fan forever.
Yeah, we can tell this story because if you're this far into it, I feel like you deserve this story. We casually ran into him just out in public in Thailand, and we had interviewed him already that like before.
We'd seen him in person. So we'd already like talked to him in person. We've also clearly done 2 virtual interviews with him already as well.
So we see him just like out in public, and
you. Because
we both saw him.
Right,
I saw him
you
first.
were the first, yeah.
And
you get full credit for this. You get full credit for this. I'm not gonna I don't want to take any credit for this.
I just squeal, yeah. Like there's just something like the way that we say his name here is the same way we say his name to his face.
Oh yeah, when we go Sia, and like honestly, we do it in interviews too. If you watch that Peace Dufe interview, the way that we speak to him is the way we always speak to. There is no like the cameras turn off and things change. No. Not with Sia.
No.
I didn't. So we were kind of in this single file line because of the way that we were like exiting this place. We were exiting, he was entering is what was happening.
Yeah.
And because of the way that like the door was, the front door, we had to be in a single file line. Right. And you were at the front of the line and I was the very back of the line. I was the last person in line, bringing up the rear. And there was something about the way you said it is because
you were like, I know that
I knew he was there. I knew that he was physically there.
Because we'll scream Sia a lot with like tigers.
We'll just scream Sia sometimes.
We'll see a tiger and we'll just say Sia.
And we'll scream it. And sometimes if like he tweets, because we have tweet notifications on for him.
Yeah.
We'll scream Sia.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'll post a story. We will scream.
Yes.
Sia. But there was something in your voice, the way you said Sia, like I knew in my heart that like he was physically present. And I like pop up, like I pop my head over like the person in front of me's shoulder and I see him. And I like, he's wearing a mask, but I know it's like because the eyes, like.
The face, everything about
Sia. And by the time, and I think he was a little bit just like shocked.
He was definitely scared because when I screamed at his face, he was like, "Oh my god!" Because like he's always prepared to see us when he sees.
Right,
like,
someone's warned him.
When we're interacting with him professionally for the podcast, but seeing us in public in person, I think he was like, "What's?" He was like,
also
"What's
someone
gonna
just
happen?"
Screaming your name.
Yeah.
Surely is jarring.
He was like, "What's gonna happen next?"
But so like, but what was so wonderful about it is by the time I got to him, because I'm like the back of the line and all the people in the middle don't really understand why or what.
Right. Because they were just friends of ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so finally, like I get to him and by then he's like, he's like, oh, okay. Like he's composed himself a bit, I think.
He's like prepared himself mentally that he's interacting with
right.
us.
And he was the sweetest thing. He was like, hi, and he did the thing with his eyes that he does.
It's so good.
And he truly, Sia is the best bias because Sia understands what a fan artist relationship should be, and he does it perfectly. And he's
talented.
Like he's such a talented actor. He's such a talented singer, and he's just like. He's a very talented celebrity because it does take talent to like be a public figure.
Right.
And he is very talented at being that public figure, at holding that line that there should be that I'm glad is there. Like I want to be able to be like, yeah. Right. Like the first time we met him in person, he was explaining to somebody how to say his name because I had told everybody. I walked in that room and I was like, don't say Suar. Like, because that's my pet peeve with Sia's name.
Right.
Don't say Suar. And so he was like, somebody very nicely was like, oh, hey, can you just like pronounce it for me a couple times?
Right.
So I heard him just like, and I saw him already and I had like had to walk away. I needed to take a moment. And and I'm like around the corner and I hear him just going, Sia. Like he's just saying his name over and over again. And I started having a full mental breakdown. And sweet Mark, our translator, he's watching me because there's not a lot of places to go.
Right.
And so I'm just like standing next to Mark, like fully, I'm like about to start crying. Robbie is so annoyed at me because he's just done my makeup and he's like, don't start crying. Like he's so mad. And I'm like fully having like a panic attack.
Yeah.
And that was fun. Like, it's
Yeah.
fun to have a fan Irish relationship. And Sia, for anybody, everybody that's a fan of his, like, we did tuk-tuks for him. This boy acted like nobody ever, like, I like he never seen a tuk-tuk before in his life. Like,
it's true.
We sent food support. This boy acted like he never ate food before in his life. Like, anything that you do for Sia, he gives back love and admiration 100-fold. He's perfect.
He's the best. Oh, I will buy all of his ugly t-shirts. Y'all, this t-shirt is so unflattering. The color is
it's the color. It's the color.
The actual like thing is very cute. The picture on it.
The quality is good.
The quality is great.
You know, shout out merch Tora, my original Element bias. Quality clothing.
Yes.
This is very quality, high quality shirt.
I will scream
Silvio
to
Hayes
the
stuff is excellent.
End of the earth. War. I wish we had gotten his new line because
I know, with the little tiger on it.
It was very on brand.
I mean,
for
it was
us,
so on brand.
But it was only shipping in Thailand.
It was
only shipping very complicated.
And we would have had to ship it to our friend, but then our friend was like, "I'm going to be out of town."
But his hoodie from that first Sobio Hay collection,
so good.
Every BL boy should go to him for advice on how to make shirts. There are many. We've gotten many quality shirts, but like he is top tier. That sweatshirt is so comfortable.
The sweatshirt is amazing.
It's like the perfect like texture. I could go on about the sweatshirt forever.
It's so wonderful. Good. Not my bias. War is my bias. Everything he does is perfect. So this obviously makes sense. Actually, though, I think this has nothing to do with biases, but the most high quality merch I've ever gotten from a boy in Thailand was Pon's shirt, Heartlets. That shirt is quality.
Yeah, it's very thick.
But it's like soft, and it doesn't at least soft. It doesn't trap heat for me. Like when I wear it, I don't feel like
overwhelmed.
Yeah, like it's too thick. Like
yeah,
it's very soft. Like all of the details on it are really nice.
The Tora shirt are very soft.
The Tora shirts are very soft. This shirt has been washed like probably 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
It's still super soft. The graphic on it hasn't really started to come off.
Oh yeah.
And also it hasn't lost its like size/shape.
Yeah.
My only beef is the sizing. Like
it's so big.
It's so big. This is a small.
I mean,
I don't wear a small.
They do say oversized.
The small is baggy on me. I don't wear as like. I mean, thanks, Tora. But like, come on.
Yes. Okay. So to wrap this all up, good luck on finding your BL bias.
Yeah. Who is your BL bias?
Tell us.
And did you choose them or did they choose you?
Tell us who your BL bias is, and tell us like the number one reason you call them your bias.
So for you, overall, dimples. For me, overall, weirdos.
Yes. That's cool. That's all it is.
That's what it boils down to. One word.
It's true.
One word.
Dimples.
Weirdos.
That feels right. This has been Let's Talk BL. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow all things Let's Talk BL at Let's Talk BL.